So yeah, let's talk about Where's the Friend's Home, a very beautiful, simple story about a young schoolboy who accidentally brings his classmate's workbook home with him. And in order to save that classmate from getting in trouble for not having done his homework, because he's pretty much on his last straw before getting expelled, he decides to go to the neighboring village and search for his friend's house to try to give him his workbook back. So there's this sort of story about conscience and all these different things that come up from the perspective of a child. Very beautifully done. I love this movie's focus on the sort of the interior, the conscience of a child, and his attempts to do the right thing, butting up against, the mysteriousness of the world that he's inhabiting, his inability to find this guy's house, and asking adults questions and not getting answers, the confusion of realizing that there are multiple different families with the same last name in this village, all of these very simple things that, present these big obstacles to this child. And it makes you feel... It really makes you feel that the time and the kind of laborious process for simple things so that you can feel the kid's impatience. All of these little details, like when his friend in the schoolyard falls and, gets dirt on his pants, and he brings him to the fountain and sort of props his leg up to, pull his pants up and check on his knee and all of this stuff. It's like, It requires an effort. He's sort of fumbling with the kid's pant leg, and there's just a lack of coordination and all these little things that Kiarostami takes his time with that should be tedious, but they just aren't, because they're poetic and they're putting you in the mindset of this child. There's so many beautiful things about perspective where he's going to this neighboring village, and very often he'll hear a sound of some activity or some voice that's happening off screen, and the camera won't show you what it is until he sees it. And so there's this very mysterious feeling to it because, he will hear a jingling of bells, or he'll hear, I don't know what's another example, but somebody pouring water or something, and he's sort of looking up and trying to see where this is coming from, or he's talking to somebody on a balcony, and a woman on a balcony above him that he can't see, and things like that. And somehow the movie is so effective at staying with his perspective that it gives you this kind of sense of wonder, but also sense of frustration at times. And then also the repetition of him trying to tell the adults the problem that he's trying to solve, or asking where somebody's house is, and most of them just don't have the time of day for him because they're wrapped up in their own concerns. Yeah. So it's just I love, one of the beautiful things to me about it is just how completely it inhabits this child's perspective.
Yeah. It's there was a time when crossing the street and going to the opposite block was a grand adventure, and I think a lot of people relate to that. And so while this boy probably enjoys, a greater degree of independence just by virtue of his circumstances and the necessities of his life, this rural, essentially peasant life out in, rural Iran, I think people can still relate to how, from the perspective of a child, even sort of a sort of simple thing can become a great adventure.
Right.
And so there is this sort of this Odyssey quality to the film. This, there and back again, a Hobbit's tale kind of element.
Right.
But then also, it's the things that he sees, sometimes you can see how, I think when he first gets to the neighboring village of Pashte, he sees somebody carrying, if I'm remembering correctly, carrying a load of sticks or something. Yeah. And it almost looks like a moving bush,
right.
And so the first impression is something that's quite fantastical,
right.
or grotesque. And then the man comes into view in the frame, and now, but you can see how a child might interpret that, with alarm or something, that there's a kind of mystique that's cast over everything, because of this child's perspective that's caught so well, but also so subtly by the camera.
Right.
It's not like Kiarostami is playing any tricks on us. It's really just the way that he frames things, and the sort of the rhythm of the film that suggests this child's perspective to us, and not some sort of like, special effects or something.
Right. And one of the most suspenseful scenes in the film is when he goes to the house of this family that has the last name of the kid that he's looking for. And he, the son of the father on the donkey that he's been following, is the guy makes doors. And so he's carrying this door out to be put in on his father's donkey to be carried back. And all you see is this door turn on its side with legs with this little kid carrying it, but he's behind the door and you can't see if it's going to be the right kid. And so you have to wait so long just to find out, and you can feel the suspense of it. So I love that all these little moments are given such suspense.
Yeah.
And that suspense and that excitement is amplified by the tediousness and the tedium and the frustration of all these repeated attempts that you see the kid having to run to the other village and then run back home and then run back to the other village again because they were just there but they left, and all of this stuff.
Yeah, and it also just, it's so reflective of his documentary style because despite the fact that this is a fiction and they're working from a script, they're working with non-actors, they're shooting on location, and there is this really authentic feel to all of the scenarios and interactions.
Yeah.
So like, take for instance, it opens in the classroom and the man who is, playing the school teacher is the local school teacher,
right.
And these are all the children who go to school there.
Right.
So again, there's this blurring of what's documentary and of what's, or it's not a blurring so much as it is
it's the neorealist thing of non-professional actors,
and it's a skillful manipulation of the material, so he uses it well.
And I also want to say too about the visual style. I mean, there are picturesque images, there's beautifully framed shots, there's some really unique visuals that recur in the next two films, such as this zigzag path going up the hill, which seems to sort of reflect this kind of striving and this kind of tedious work to get to your goal. But so much of the visual interest of the film is just because of how thoroughly it inhabits the perspective of the character and what it tells you about the perspective of the character. Like, it does look nice, but what's interesting is the things that he isn't showing you as well. And the visual suspense, in that sense, rather than just the suspense of the beauty of any one individual shot.
Yeah.
But we should talk too about the kind of the social morality of the film too. I think one interesting thing to notice is that, well, this is a film about a friendship. It's right there in the title. And this kid doesn't live in his same village. He's the kid that he sits next to in his class, and he has sympathy for his situation because he's always getting in trouble. But you get the sense that the adults in the movie, for the most part, really don't care about anybody who's not related to them. Like when he's trying to tell his mother that he has an obligation to give this kid his workbook back because he needs it and he's the one who took it. She just doesn't have any time for that. She's concerned about him getting his chores and his homework done, her getting her chores done. And anything that's outside of that, like, narrow ambit, is not of interest to her. And so it's interesting that from the child's perspective, you have this ability to look outside of these immediate practical needs and to look at somebody who is not part of your sort of your narrow circle and attend to their needs,
Yeah, I mean, I think another aspect to it is just the difficulty with which adults sympathize with the concerns of children.
Right.
So I think it's all too easy to sort of like cavalierly dismiss what might feel very important to a child,
right,
but from an adult's perspective is a non-issue. Now, this happens again with when he encounters sort of like the elders of the village,
right,
who sent him on this menial task as basically just like an arbitrary act of demanding deference, you know,
Yeah,
and,
he tells him to go get
exercising
his
authority.
cigarettes.
Yeah. And he acknowledges even that it's just to sort of teach him respect.
Right.
But this is, you know, putting aside the legitimate concerns or not of this elder about instilling respect in the next generation, it just demonstrates like such an obvious inability to actually attend to what is concerning this child right now, you know? And so I think that there's that. And then I think also Kiarostami seems to be interested in the disconnect that happens between home and school.
Yes.
You know, where
Yes.
children spend their time, where they're taught and educated, where they make friendships, where they're disciplined, and then where they have to navigate a whole other hierarchy of tasks and characters.
Right, because you get the impression he barely has time to do his homework because he keeps getting interrupted by go give the baby some water and,
Right.
and things like that.
And we see other students who similarly, you know, have to work in the fields with their father,
Right.
you know, who might have illiterate parents, and yet they have a teacher, you know, saying, no, your responsibility is to your studies first, and then you can help work on the farm.
Right.
And so, you know,
Right.
it's the parents might not see things that way.
And this is all coming out of Kiarostami's interest and his concern and his work on the education of
Yeah.
children, you know.
But it's just kind of amazing because you also gain an appreciation for just how powerless children are, how much they are dependent upon the whims and priorities of the adults around them.
right.
So at the end of the day, this child has to really just depend on.
Yeah, and the
adults.
adults are not trying to coordinate with each other to make sure that they're not giving conflicting messages. So
Right.
the grandfather, you know, wants him to get his cigarettes, but he's supposed to go get bread for his parents,
Right.
you know, and all of this stuff.
Right. Right.
So it just becomes very complicated to perform these
Yes.
simple tasks. And, you know, the film brings this grandfather character in, and he's talking about how, you know, when he was a boy, his father would give him an allowance, you know, every week and beat him every week or something like that, or every 2 weeks and beat him every week. And sometimes he would forget to give the allowance, but he would never forget to give the beating. And the other old man is like, well, what if you hadn't done anything wrong? And he was like, well, he beat me anything just so I'd learn, or I forget what he says, something
Yeah.
like that. And so there's sort of this critique of the old ways, but it's also that same time you get this scene with this door salesman who's being really pushy and trying to get these old men to buy a new door. And they're like, my door is perfectly fine. I'm an old man. I'm not going to need a new door for the rest of my life. And he's making all these kind of specious arguments. And then later we meet kind of the one adult who really does, you know, listen to our main character, who is this other old door maker, this other window and door, you know, craftsman. And the way that he's introduced is very beautiful because he's in this kind of dark alley, and then suddenly these colored lights, almost as if from like a rose window in a cathedral, appear on the wall above him. And it becomes this like magical environment because this, you know, this window opposite has been opened, and these things that this old man is making are shining through. And then you get that simultaneous frustration at the slowness of things, but you also get this old man who's not in a hurry. And the other adults are all kind of, with the exception of the grandfather, but many of them are kind of too much in a hurry to listen. And this old man is simultaneously teaching the boy patience and having to follow his slow walk because he's going to show him where the friend's house is. But he's also teaching him some wisdom, and he's listening to him, and he's talking to him about real things.
Yeah.
And he's talking to him about how he doesn't understand why, you know, everybody wants to move the city and nobody wants to have beautiful things that last for a long time anymore. People don't seem to have a use for his craftsmanship. They're replacing them with, you know, shoddier, less
Right.
beautiful things.
Right. And the
stuff
things
like
that he makes are very beautiful.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you immediately it becomes immediately apparent that this character sort of represents more than what he is, you know, especially because he's talking about these sort of bigger picture, you know, waxing philosophical or poetic, you know, about the way things are going.
Right.
So you do kind of feel like an encounter with the wise old man at the edge of the forest or something, or like something out of a fairy tale, like a Geppetto, or something.
Right.
You know, I think it's also significant that this is at the end of the day too, when night descends and
It's becoming windy and spooky, and there's dogs barking. He says, "I'll keep an eye on you."
Right.
As he goes off, it's like Gandalf leaving the company at the edge of the forest.
But then
you know?
also like the lighting becomes much more kind of surreal almost in the shadows that are cast and the designs that we can see in the window frames.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of a it all gets to be a lot more I've used this word already, fantastic or dreamlike, you know, in this final sequence of the film.